Hello and welcome back to the Advanced English Podcast. My name's Hayley, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about education in the UK. The transcript and vocabulary list is linked in the description as usual, so don't forget to download it. And today I'll be talking about public versus private schools, subject choice, uniforms, creativity, funding, and ultimately whether the system is actually fair or not. Or whether it's just something that we kind of tell ourselves. Because, we're basically told that school is a place where talent rises to the top, that hard work pays off. So if you just put your head down and get on with it, you can succeed regardless of where you come from. But is that actually true in the UK, or is the system just quietly designed to stack the odds in the favour of certain students from the very beginning? So we're going to unpack all of that in the episode today. But before we get stuck in, if you do enjoy these deeper conversations in advanced English, make sure that you follow or subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss future episodes. And if you find this episode interesting or useful, please do share it with someone who's also learning English at advanced level. It really helps the podcast to grow, and great for if you're studying for Cambridge C1 or C2 Proficiency as well. Right, let's get into it then. So first, we need to clear something up because this confuses a lot of people outside the UK. In Britain, a public school is actually a private school. Okay, when someone refers to public school, they're actually saying that they went to private school. Yes, it's backwards. What most countries call public schools, we call them state schools. Public schools in the UK are elite, fee-paying institutions, often with centuries of history, really small classes, and very powerful alumni networks. And this is where the two-tier system starts to feel kind of real. Like on paper, state schools educate the vast majority of children. They're funded by the government, and they follow the national curriculum. Many of them are excellent. Some of them even outperform private schools academically. But private schools offer a lot more things. They have smaller classes. They've got extensive extracurricular programs. Some have got music studios, drama theatres, sports facilities that look like professional training centres. And probably most importantly, the social networks. Because education isn't just about what happens in the classroom, it's about who you mix with. It's about cultural confidence, and it's about how comfortable you feel in certain spaces in later life. And some critics do argue that private school doesn't just give you a good education, it gives you a leg up. It can stack the odds in your favour way before you sit your first exam. So you may have better access to university preparation, better access to coaching, and connections that quietly open doors for you. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room as well. Money. So fees can easily price families out. I mean, most private schools, they start from £30,000 a year. So when people defend private schools saying it's a parental choice, others can push back and say, well, actually, it's a choice that is only available to the minority. And now defenders of the system say something else entirely. They argue that parents who can afford it have every right to invest in their children's education, as they do. They argue that a lot of private schools offer scholarships and that state schools can be just as strong, and they are. But if we're being honest, the UK has struggled a lot with social mobility. We believe that talent rises naturally, but we also know that access and confidence and networks matter. So is private education simply a reflection of inequality in society, or does it actively reproduce it? That's kind of the main question here. One of the strongest arguments in favour of the UK system is flexibility. So in a lot of European countries, students are channeled into specific academic tracks relatively early. There's, you have classical high schools, scientific high schools, technical institutes, engineering schools, and students can specialise from the age of 14, 15. And obviously the advantage of that system is focus. If you know you want to be an engineer, then you can immerse yourself in maths and physics really early on. If you want to pursue humanities, then you can get into literature, philosophy, languages But the disadvantage is you're going to be pigeonholed too young. So in the UK, students follow a broad curriculum until they're 16. So they basically study everything. And then at GCSE level, they narrow down their subjects. And then at A level, which is after from like 16 to 18, they typically choose just 3 or 4 subjects that they want to focus on. So supporters say that this allows students to keep their options open longer. You know, at a 14-year-old, they might think they hate science, but then discover that actually, you know, at 16, they're brilliant at it. So the system allows you to opt for different paths slightly later than in some of the European models. But there is a trade-off. When you specialise at A level, you specialise hard. Like dropping maths at 16 can effectively just rule out certain careers. Choosing humanities over sciences can close a lot of doors. You are not fully locked in, but you're certainly nudged in a certain direction. So which is better? Early specialisation or later, kind of more narrowing? There is an argument that early specialisation produces deeper expertise. There's another argument that broad-based education produces more well-rounded thinkers. But perhaps the real question isn't which system is objectively better, but what values each country prioritizes, focus or flexibility. Kind of depends on how you look at it. And this can be where the debate gets a little bit heated, because on paper, UK schools, they value creativity. You know, art, music, drama, design, they're all part of the curriculum. I took a lot of art at high school. So when I got to 14, I chose to do fine art, textiles, which was like fashion, basically. And I took an art-based IT subject, which was like designing 3D models and stuff. So 3 out of my 4 options I chose were actually art-based in high school. And then again, when I went into college, which is between 16 to 18 in the UK, like your baccalaureate sort of years. Again, I chose art-based subjects. 2 of my subjects were art-based. 1 was a language, and 1 was psychology, I think. So yeah, you can definitely do art-based subjects. Creativity is valued in the UK, but over the last 15 years, many teachers and parents argue that creative subjects have basically been squeezed out. So after the 2008 financial crisis, austerity measures basically led to tighter budgets and schools were forced to prioritize. And then what gets prioritized in a results-driven culture? Measurable outcomes, i.e. maths, English, science. So league tables don't easily, capture creativity, they capture grades. So schools increasingly began teaching to test. Education, some critics argue, become about ticking boxes rather than nurturing curiosity. And this is true. I actually, just out of interest, I looked at my old high school's website and I was looking at their staff. And when I was there, the art department was huge. There must have been probably 6 to 8 different art teachers. It was like 1 floor of a building was just the art building, and it was amazing. And then I looked now and they have 1 art teacher. And I was so shocked. And it wasn't the same teacher, the brilliant teacher I had. She'd left. And I was very shocked at that. So it's clearly true, because my school was actually specialised in visual arts and media. Specialised not the way that European schools are, but in that they got grants and funding from the government to put into visual arts and media, which I'm assuming they don't do anymore. So, because when budgets are tight, art programs, they're usually the first to get cut. Schools, they can cut back on music lessons, drama, art materials. Creative subjects can feel quite watered down or sidelined. And that leads to a deeper concern. If education just becomes an exam factory, do we risk stifling creativity? Do we end up with a kind of paint-by-numbers education where students just learn how to answer exam questions but not actually how to think independently? The supporters of reform argue something different. They say rigor matters, that raising standards is essential, and without clear benchmarks, students, especially disadvantaged ones, can fall behind. So again, we're faced with tension. Is the system fostering creativity or gradually just squeezing it out in favour of performance? And that's not an easy question to answer. But if you speak to, British students about school, one word often comes up: exams. So GCSEs at 16, A-levels at 18. There's high stakes assessments that determine your access to university, what you do in the future, and possibly even like your self-worth. So the UK system places a big emphasis on final exams. Like, students sit papers that can completely shape their future, and if they fail, they'll have to resit, and some students cram for weeks and weeks and weeks. Others maybe feel like they're on the brink of burnout. And critics are arguing that this high-stakes model creates massive pressure, and it just encourages like short-term memorization rather than actually long-term understanding. So it just rewards anyone who performs well under stress, really. And then there's also the phenomenon of grade inflation. So where the boundaries shift and debates rage about whether standards have been lowered or whether the goalposts have been quietly moved. Supporters argue the opposite. They say exams provide clarity, that objective testing ensures fairness, and that rigour prevents complacency. But what about mental health? What about students who don't perform well in exam conditions? What about creativity and curiosity? In a system that's heavily geared towards measurable outcomes, it's easy to see how education can just feel transactional. Study, revise, perform, repeat. But many students do thrive in it as well. Many appreciate clear expectations and they can benefit from structure. Again, it's not all black and white. So let's shift slightly, because this is something international listeners often find different or a bit weird about the UK, but it's uniforms. So most UK schools require them. I had to wear one. Again, I went to a state school. It was just a normal, publicly funded school, funded by the government. But yeah, I had to wear them in primary school and also in high school as well. In high school, you normally have to wear a blazer or a smart jacket, a tie, specific shoes. Ties have specific colours based on what house you're in, white shirt, and smart trousers or a smart skirt. There's also strict rules about haircuts and jewellery. Some schools even crack down on skirt length or the colour of your socks. Mine wasn't too bad, to be fair. So some people, they think uniforms promote equality, so that they say students can like blend in rather than compete over fashion. And it's also like some kind of rite of passage or a way to instill discipline. Having been a student who was forced to wear a uniform, I would not agree, because every student basically tried to change their uniform to fit their personality. So I would wear, for example, really wide trousers, black trousers, and underneath them I would either wear black Vans or black Converse, which were against school rules. But because my trousers were so big, you couldn't really see the shoes. Some of the people would make their ties really short, and they'd roll their sleeves up. They'd add stuff to their shirts to make it look different. So it doesn't matter how much you're trying to put rules. Students are always going to break the rules, right? So, and then again, other people think, that uniforms promote conformity. So they question whether, suppressing individuality is actually the right message during adolescence, when you already feel, maybe overwhelmed about identity exploration. Again, I remember I have a very distinct memory of being in high school, and I'd done something with my eyeliner. I think I was wearing red or purple eyeliner, and that was it. The rest of my uniform was fine. And I was a really good kid at school. I got really good grades. I was nice to teachers. I never talked back to teachers. I was never in any trouble. And I remember someone a senior member of staff walked into my science lesson, and I was on the front row, and she saw me with my eyeliner and said to me, "Get that off your face now." And I was like, "Why? I'm in the middle of studying." She was like, "No, take it off." I said, "Well, I've got no makeup remover. She said, I don't care. And she handed me a paper towel, but like it was almost like sandpaper, like these blue paper towels that we have in schools in the UK. And she put water on it and she was like, get it off now. And I had to like scrub my eyes and it still wouldn't come off. And my eyes were really sore. And obviously I was wasting time. I should have been studying, not wasting 10 minutes trying to take makeup off. And yet there were other people in my class that were not good at school. They were really badly behaved. And she didn't say anything to them. So it was like my uniform was more important than my behavior or my grades, which really kind of pissed me off. And I hated that teacher. I still remember her name. It was Mrs. McLeod. Absolutely hated her. But yeah, stuff like that. It's like, why is it important? Are grades not important? Is your behavior not important? Why does it matter whether I've got eyeliner on or not? I don't know. There's something deeply cultural about this. Like, UK places value on discipline and presentation, turning up properly dressed. But only in school, weirdly. Outside of school, not so much. But does it actually create cohesion, or does it suppress self-expression? Like much of the education debate, it does reflect deeper societal values. But we can't talk about education without addressing, the changes that happened after 2008. So I finished school in 2008, high school. And I really appreciated my education. I thought I got a brilliant education, fantastic teachers, subjects, you could choose whatever subjects you wanted. The schools were really well equipped. We had like cooking lessons where they actually you would cook in the class, because we had, classrooms with ovens and stuff that you could actually cook. Art department was great. It was fantastic. I really appreciate my education. But after that, when the crisis hit 2008, it led to all these new policies. So public spending was tightened. Schools had to, have their budgets reduced. And at the same time, the government's rolled out lots of reforms aimed at raising standards. So academization expanded. More schools moved away from direct local authority control. Free schools curriculums were adjusted. And grading systems were revised. People argue that these reforms raised standards, but they also argue that it increased fragmentation and inequality. So schools basically had to do a lot more with a lot less money. Staff workloads increased, but then there was less staff because schools couldn't afford to, hire them. And then some programs, like art programs, were just quietly phased out. And through all of this, the broader question remains, are we improving quality here, or are we just shifting responsibility? And education policy often feels like a pendulum. One government pushes for autonomy, the next for central control. One raises the bar, the other one adjusts criteria. Meanwhile, students just continue to move through the system completely unaware of, this political tug of war that's basically shaping their classrooms. So after all that, we're back to the central question. Is the UK education system fair? On one hand, it offers flexibility. Students can branch out into subjects they love, or at least they could. They can change direction at 16 if they want to. They're not locked into rigid tracks when they're 14. On the other hand, the presence of elite private schools create an obvious divide. Social mobility does remain a concern, and funding disparities do exist as well. Creativity is valued, but it's overshadowed by exam performance. Okay, maybe uniforms can promote equality, but at the cost of individuality. And exams do provide clarity, but with a lot of pressure as well. So maybe the better question isn't whether the system's fair, maybe it's whether it actually functions fairly in practice. Because education, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It reflects society. So inequality in schools often mirrors inequality outside of them. Banning private schools wouldn't automatically eliminate privilege. Removing exams wouldn't automatically create creativity. Increasing funding wouldn't automatically fix cultural attitudes. But at the end of the day, education is an opportunity. And perhaps that's where the real conversation lies, not just in structure, but, in mindset. So at the end of the day, yeah, education it shapes more than just your knowledge, right? It shapes your identity. You spend most of your life as a child in school. Most of the memories you're going to have are going to be of school. It shapes your identity and your ambition, and it shapes who feels entitled to speak up and who thinks they should be quiet. The UK system, it has its strengths. There's a case to be made for both sides. Maybe that's why the debate never really goes away, because education isn't just about school. It's about the type of society you want to build. Do we prioritise excellence, even if it creates competition? Do we prioritise equality, even if it means limiting private choice? Do we prioritise measurable outcomes or creativity? Depends how you look at it. But one thing is certain, education always reflects our values. That's why the conversation matters. So if you've been through the UK education system, or you've been through any other education system, I'd like to know your experience. Did it feel fair to you? Did you feel supported? Did it feel just like an exam factory? Or do you think it actually opened doors for you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this discussion useful for your English, don't forget to like, follow and subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. Reminder again, transcription and vocabulary lists are in the description for you for free. Make sure you download them there. Thanks for listening for today, and I'll see you next time on the Advanced English podcast. See you then. Bye.